Guys! I am here again to give you another educational vlog, and for today, we are going to understand the difference between ethnocentrism and cultural relativism with its advantages and its disadvantages. So, let's start! What is ethnocentrism? Ethnocentrism is the belief of superiority of one's personal ethnic group, but it can also develop from racial or religious differences. Ethnocentric individuals believe that they are better than other individuals for reasons based solely on their heritage. Ethnocentrism is the belief that one's cultural group is essentially more important and superior to others, whether it got to do with foods, religion, politics, or any customs or rituals or anything else. So the term ethnocentrism was first developed by Ludwig Komplowitz and then used by social scientist William Summer. It was used as a term to describe why one culture feels like it has always occupied the highest point of humanity when compared to other groups. So this attitude or approach may apply to the current nations and cultures in the world, but it can also relate to all of the civilizations that existed in the past. Ethnocentrism occurs when someone judges the acts of another culture based on the preconceptions that are found in the standards and values of one's own culture. This process can occur on a societal level or involved with the specific behaviors or actions in the areas such as religion, language, behavior, or even customs. So it is in these specific categories or aspects where we can define the unique cultural identity of each ethnicity. So someone who takes an ethnocentric approach will always view their own group as the center of everything in the world. So everything else is done, scaled, or rated with reference to their primary definition to prove seniority. So it is an approach in life which often leads to vanity and pride, so failing to see any strength in the idea of diversity. One of the examples of ethnocentrism in culture is the Asian cultures across all the countries of Asia. So throughout Asia, the way of eating is to use chopsticks with every meal. So these people may find it unnecessary to find that people in other societies, such as the American society, that they tend to eat using forks, spoons, knives, and etc. So since these countries use chopsticks to eat every meal, they may find it foolish for other cultures to not use utensils similar to chopsticks. But however, they do not accept the fact that they use different utensils for eating. So this example is not something extreme that could lead to genocide or war, but it is a large enough gap between these cultures for people to see their way of eating as the natural or best way to typically eat their food. Advantage of ethnocentrism. One of the advantage is the view that can help evolve society to remember who it has always been. So the people who tend to follow ethnocentric views often take their cues from history and traditions that their ancestors brought to the modern culture. Because there is such an emphasis on keeping things the same whenever possible, it is easier to feel like we are in touch with the past in meaningful ways. Ethnocentrism gives us an opportunity to show future generations what is possible through the implementations of continuous best practice based on historical knowledge. This process is how we can keep the distinct elements of a culture alive for centuries without the need to find a compromise. Another advantage, it can produce higher levels of self esteem. People will only start to compare their culture with what others experience when there are high levels of pride involved in the personal experience. You must love who you are and your community before you can make an accurate judgment on how someone else is living. This approach can be advantageous in certain circumstances because it creates opportunities for people to find common ground. By comparing who we are with who others want to be, it becomes possible to find connections with like minded people so that we can avoid the perils of social isolation. Humans need to feel like they're connected to something or someone for them to feel like there is a place for them in this world. So, despite its many flaws, ethnocentrism can make this possible. Another advantage, it creates an attitude of independence. The people who maintain an ethnocentric view in life will not typically bother much about other societies and cultures in the world, past or even present. This attitude causes them to lead a self directed life. Some groups may come together with a similar perspective of the world, but there are also others who decide to thrive under independent isolation. People find contentment when there is unity in thought or a desire to take action. It is a process which can bring more solidarity to specific elements of society while allowing cultures to pursue their goals at the same time without any interference. We also have disadvantage. One of the disadvantage is decisions are made that is based on unrealistic comparisons. The attitude of ethnocentrism is always one of superiority. Someone from outside of an existing culture is judging the actions of another people based on perspectives that is gained without the use of wisdom. Although every person on our planet has their own definition of normal, we cannot apply this observation to anyone else. Each person, even within a similar culture or ethnicity, leads an independent life. Their perspectives and differences are unique. That means the conclusions which people draw when using ethnocentrism as their foundation for decision making are based on generalizations and opinions instead of facts. Because this information does not include the other side of the equation, the conclusions we reach when using this approach are misleading at best. Another disadvantage, ethnocentrism can drive people away from what they love. So, if the only thing that a person experiences is rejection in life, then there is no desire to be around people who think of them as being inferior. This attitude drives a wedge between groups where those who are in the minority feel like the only option available to them sometimes is to leave. Communities in the United States are becoming more like minded than ever before because of this very reason. Whenever the approach of ethnocentrism is taken, it creates a circumstance where individuals or groups provide ultimatums to each other. This approach that says, you're with me or you're against me. So, this attitude in all aspects of life. So, there is no middle ground when taking the ethnocentric approach because the only relationships which form from these ultimatums are the ones which share specific belief systems. People are moving further away from diversity. So, in time, this will cause humanity to become weaker. Each person decides to live their life based on the ethics and values which are found in that individual's local society. These decisions do not translate to other cultures because there are a different set of perspectives involved. The diversity that we have in humanity demands that we have a willingness to accept the experiences that everyone else contributes, because that is how we all become better at the individual level. So all in all, the advantages and disadvantages of ethnocentrism, it shows us that when we embrace the uniqueness of each identity, then we can find moments of inspiration and innovation. So now let's go to cultural relativism. Cultural relativism, it refers to the idea that the values, knowledge, and behavior of people must be understood with their own cultural context. So the concept of cultural relativism, as we know and use it today, was established as an analytic tool by German American anthropologist Franz Boas in the early 20th century. So we all know that ethnocentrism is the practice of viewing and judging someone else's culture based on the values and beliefs of one's own. So from this standpoint, we might frame other cultures as weird, exotic, intriguing, and even as problems to be solved. In contrast, when we recognize that there are many cultures of the world that have their own beliefs, values, and practices that have developed in particular historical, political, social, material, and ecological contexts, and that it makes sense that they would differ from our own, and that none are necessarily right or wrong, or good or bad, then we are engaging the concept of what we called cultural relativism. We also have the advantage. One of the advantage of cultural relativism, it is a system which promotes cooperation. For the most part, humanity is strong because of the differences we all have. Every individual has a different perspective that is based on their upbringing, experiences, and personal thoughts. By embracing the many differences we have, the cooperation creates the potential for a stronger society. Each individual definitions of success allows us to pursue stronger bonds with one another and potentially achieve more, because there are no limitations from a group level in what can or cannot be accomplished. Another advantage, it creates a society where equality is possible. Then in any society, people rise by climbing on top of other people. It is a socially acceptable way of creating discrimination. We see this today in the wage gap that women face, the educational opportunities that minority groups face, and the violence we see because of political oppression. Cultural relativism, it allows the individual to define their moral code without defining the moral code of others. Each person is separate in such a society. That separation creates equality because each person can set their own definition of success. Another advantage, cultural relativism creates a society without judgment. So we are so trained to judge others in today's world that we don't even give it a second thought. So you look at someone and you says, "Oh my god, glad that isn't me." So in that phrase, it is already a judgment. But under the theory of cultural relativism, judgment goes away. The only person that judges you is yourself. People who might disagree with you are able to set their own codes and standards for their own individualistic bubble. So instead of worrying about others, you only worry about yourself. So now let's go to disadvantage. The disadvantage of cultural relativism, it creates a system that is fueled by personal bias. So every society has a certain natural bias to it because of how humanity operates. People tend to prefer to be with others who have similar thoughts and feelings, so they segregate themselves into neighborhoods, communities, and social groups that share specific perspectives. So when people are given the power to define their own moral code, then they will do so based on their personal bias. There is no longer a group perspective, so people follow their own code at the expense of others. Another disadvantage, it is an idea that is based on the perfection of humanity. Many people strive to do good every day. Most want to see everyone have the chance to pursue happiness in some way. That is why the idea of cultural relativism often seems to be inviting. The only problem is that people are not perfect. We can be forgetful. We can even lie. We can become aggressive when a driver cuts you off while driving and puts your family at risk. Without a group of moral code in place to govern decisions, anything could happen when we experience these moments of imperfection. Another disadvantage, it draws people away from one another. Although cultural relativism can promote people coming together to share their strengths, it can also encourage people to draw apart from one another. So C.S. Lewis, in his description of hell from Screwtape Letters, it envisions there a place where the people are constantly going away from each other to avoid the demons that each person has, because each person is uncertain of what codes and standards another is following. The natural inclination for self preservation causes people to draw away. You might develop a close knit community at first, but as Lewis describes, each demon causes people to back away from one another instead of coming closer. So, the disadvantage and advantage of relativism, it somehow has an important, because cultural relativism provides objective insight into other culture, because it promotes cross culture or cross cultural. It also provides empathy, understanding, and collaboration with emphasis on similarities among human cultures. So cultural relativism promotes an individualistic perspective which governs how a person acts, thinks, and responds. Each person can set their own moralistic codes which they follow.